Welcome back to Legends of Adtech, the podcast that goes beyond the buzzwords and gets straight into the conversations that are really shaping the future of this industry. Now, this season is in partnership with our Season 3 sponsor, Revving, who help digital businesses unlock faster access to the revenue they've already earned. And this is all through flexible funding solutions, and it's designed to keep that all-important capital moving. You can learn more at revving.io. Now, I'm your host, Julia Linehan. I'm the founder and CEO of The Digital Voice, and today we're asking a big question. Is creative strategy reclaiming power in the age of AI? Big one today. Now, for years, creativity has been told to follow the data and performance, and that's led the charge. But with AI accelerating everything, are we entering a moment where creativity can take back control? Or is it a risk of being automated? So to unpack this, I'm joined by Rhiannon Davies, VP of Creative Strategy at Jellyfish. Now, Rhiannon's going to be an amazing guest because she's got a background rooted in social strategy. She's worked across some of the most influential brands in the world, from Selfridges and Burberry to Netflix. And today at Jellyfish, she works across brands like Google and Oatly and is sitting at that crossroads between culture, creativity, media and social. If that wasn't enough, and outside all of that, she's also a creator in her own right with an incredible 135,000 followers in the equestrian space. So this isn't just a conversation about creative strategy. It is about how social culture, creators and AI are colliding and are going to reshape. So, Rhiannon, welcome to Legends of Adtech. Good to have you here.
Thanks. Gosh, I should get you to interview me in every room. That was great. Thanks.
It always sounds so good, honestly. Luckily, we record this, so you can just capture that. I'm going to make your life hard, as I do for every guest. And this is, you've got 60 seconds to really tell us who you are and where you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I think you've done a wonderful job of introducing me there. But when I look back on my career at the moment, I really think that the red thread for me has been bringing together the very best of culture, often rooted in social, with the very best of technical innovation. I've had some incredible bosses in my time, both in-house and at agencies. And the idea of bringing together that tech and that culture in service of brands and creativity, I think that is what I love. And that's what I've always done in my career. So that it's a very topical moment for that in the industry. So I feel as though I've been well prepped, which is nice.
But what's really interesting, and you know, a lot of people, and I love these terms, these titles, creative strategist, but you would say, and we were chatting just before, that you don't see yourself in that traditional creative strategist role. So probably, if you can, again, just define exactly what you do.
Yeah, well, I think creative strategy is one of those really interesting terms that it depending on who you ask, you will get a different answer as to what that job is. And I think that's probably quite symptomatic of where our industry is in a very exciting way. So for some people, creative strategy will be the minutiae of assets and where do you put certain subs, where do you put text, what are the overlays, what is the format, what is the length, like that to some people is creative strategy. And then at the other end of the spectrum, and closer, I would say, to what I see my job is to bring together really good data and insights, not just numerical data, but cultural insights, almost that, I hate to say desk research because it reduces what it feels like, but really understanding cultural behavior and how that can shape a category or a company's approach and white space. And I think that is closer to what I do, anchored in social, but working across owned, earned, paid, and as you said, sort of the media landscape at large.
Does data lead creativity or does creativity lead data?
I've seen both. I mean, I think as a diehard strategist, I always, I do like to have data, but I often find actually if you're constantly asking for numerical data or big data sets, that you can hold yourself back from really good creative work, because some of the best creative work that I've seen is when someone has just seen a human truth or a little behavior that's just beginning to bubble up. You don't know that it's true in the data, but you feel it in your bones. And that is often why I think social creatives in particular are so good, because they see these things. They pull together red threads as they're scrolling through their feeds, and they can't prove it in a report that came out with Kantar, but they know it's true. And the brands that take a leap of faith on that often end up having content that feels really resonant.
Yeah, I think that's always interesting. And I always think, luckily, creativity should actually be beyond any of those data points. It should actually be, as a brand, what you feel aligns with you. If I think about my own LinkedIn, how I write and what pictures and imagery I use is simply reflective on what I want to present. Now, the data tells me which ones work the best, and more creative I get, the better the results, but actually you still stay true. So I wonder, do you ever get in a position where brands are so strong on what they believe their brand to be that they aren't willing to be in any way swayed by the data, that they just want to stay within their own path? How often does that happen?
Yeah, I've definitely seen it. I have a couple of brands in mind who I won't name, and they are often seen sometimes as mavericks, but I think sometimes you're missing opportunities, because the reality is, even if you're making a decision that feels like it's just off the cuff, to your point, your LinkedIn, your brain is not stupid. No one is stupid. We have data points. You just don't realize that you're pulling on those threads. And so I think everyone is using data, even if you don't realize it. You've seen something that you believe to be true. Well, you've probably seen a couple of instances of that and pulled them together. And I do think that if you're ignoring data, you are ignoring the opportunity to see a big shift in your audience in favor of something that you believe. And the reality is, none of us are objective. We all have a subjective view on things, and you might not be as close to your audience as you think you are, particularly if you're in a quite a specific category. So data is important in the sense that you need to understand how audiences are changing and moving, and making sure that you don't have blinkers on when it comes to changing culture.
Say it was, I don't know, it's somebody's first day on earth and they saw the role creative and social strategist, or creative and social strategy as an area of work. WTF is that role? I'm always told by producer Ren to not swear. It takes a lot of effort.
I love it. Okay, so WTF is that role. Creative and social strategy for me are frameworks that are grounded in insight and cultural behavior that allow a company to take their content from kind of day to day to a long-term approach that is differentiated and drives results. And that, I think, is really key, because quite often when brands come to us, they know what they are doing social, and they're kind of going day by day and they're looking at little insights of, oh, this post did better than this post, but they feel as though they don't really understand the bigger why, and they don't really understand what makes them different from their competitors or the category or creators in their category. And what good strategy should do is bring them up 3,000-foot view, take a view of the category, the culture, creators, competitors, find their white space, especially in a world that's very AI driven. We have a lot of AI content, and give them an approach that is grounded in brand metrics that they can prove over the long term. That, for me, is a good strategy, a good strategist.
Let's think about your work. So where your work and Jellyfish's work, say, sits within that modern marketing mix. And is it leading, does content and social strategy lead the work? And is it sat in the right place? I mean, I'm wondering, when you have different teams and you have, say, your team could report into the head of insights in some ways, but your team could equally report, like go into or channel into the creative direction team. I wonder where it sits in the modern marketing mix.
So I think the way that we have it at Jellyfish really works. This is a team that I founded that didn't exist before I joined. And as a result, it sits sort of on an island that allows it to orbit all of these other teams, which works beautifully for the different teams and the different brands that we have. So for example, there may be a project where we have a brand strategist and a creative strategist working together. They come up with something, they're grounded in insight, it then goes to the creative team, and then we have content strategy coming further on. There might be a scenario where a creative strat and a media strat link up. It might be that you have creative strategy and the content team, if it's a very organic social approach. So I think the benefit of, at least the way that we set it up at Jellyfish, is that it can flex depending on the ask. And it means that you get the very best skill sets up front to drive those insights in that direction. And I do think strategy should come first. I think any strategist listening to this has probably had a scenario where they've had to back strategy into some creative that has been come up with. And that's okay, but it's not my preferred way of working, because I think you can miss some core data or some core provocations that can be interesting for creatives.
It's like going an analogy of like building planning, that you start building before you've got the plans in place. It's never a good idea. So get the building, you need the plan, then you set the foundations, then you do the building blocks. So, and by the way, I love that as an island. You just pivot and everybody, it's like you are the sun. You could even say, and everyone rolls around you. I'm going to have others.
I don't want to upset my creative colleagues here. I think, strategists are very much the kind of behind the curtain doing the things. Like, I think I read somewhere, it might have even been a Mark Ritson quote, where he said, if your strategy is good, it should feel incredibly obvious when people read it. And actually nobody sees that iceberg effect under the water of all the work you had to do to make it feel that simple. So I do feel like that is the role of strategy. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride sort of vibes.
We all know we've got a spine, but actually we don't see it, but we know it's our backbone.
Exactly.
Something along that. Oh God, I'm full of analogies today. So listen, we have to talk AI, and right now at Jellyfish, I mean, you're doing some incredible things, but I'm always curious with our guests to know, how are you using AI to genuinely enhance creative work and not just speed it up?
Yeah, so Jellyfish, we're very fortunate, I think, within the Brandtech Group that they have been doing this for a very long time. 10 years ago, our founder of the Brandtech Group was talking about AI. And as a result, we have this incredible tech stack that really runs the whole workflow. So we've got Pencil, where you can generate images and videos. You've got Social Agents, which allows you to pull together these deep insights from the platforms. We've got Share of Model that allows you to see how your brand is being represented and being surfaced by LLMs. For me, obviously, as a strategist, and I think somebody with a social background, and also the fact that I run Social Agents, that is my favorite use of AI, which is the technology is just allowing us to get those human and cultural insights quicker. And it allows us to do them in so much more depth than they would have before. So I think previously, a lot of social strategists would spend a lot of time on the platforms looking for those nuggets, those jewels, those signals of changing behavior or interesting human insight. And what this AI tool, Social Agents, allows us to do is gather all of that on a much bigger scale than we would have before. And that for me is a celebration of creativity and cultural insight. It doesn't take away from that next step where the creative comes together, which is what I love.
I think it's so important. So do you think, because I see it and I see the value, but would you say that creatives have the right to feel threatened by AI, or is it just that they're misunderstanding it, or that they're not embracing what it can do, that they're seeing it as a competitor, not a collaborator? What do you think?
I think a few years ago, that was a very sort of fair assessment. It was a very new technology, and we hadn't yet seen examples of AI that was used collaboratively. I think in 2026, I would really challenge creatives who aren't able to see AI as a partner in some way, because we now have so many examples of ways that AI can enhance your workflow. And that doesn't just mean creating AI content like the Door Brothers, for example. It also means gathering your insights a little bit quicker, allowing you to sketch up storyboards, getting you closer to the creative part of the process, or allowing you to create something in real time. So I think if you're still thinking about AI as like it's replacing the creative work, you're missing actually a large part of the workflow where AI can plug in before that creative moment even happens.
I think you're so right. Okay, well, here's another question. This is for then around the consumer's experience. In your opinion, do you think that work created by AI should have that, I suppose, not quite disclaimer, but at least let the audience know this work has been created with the use of AI? And then how far do you take it? Because AI could be right in the background, or it could be producing the whole thing. How transparent should we be?
I think right now, absolutely transparent. If content is that the actual creative that you're viewing is generated with AI, I think we need to have a disclaimer on that. And I do think the social platforms, particularly like Meta and YouTube, have been very good at making sure that those labels are available. And the reason I say that is we are contextually as a world, I think we're in a space where people are a little bit worried about the information that they're viewing. Politically and economically, things are a little bit challenging. And so it's really important that people feel that they know what they're looking at, especially in the climate. I think in the longer term, there might come a point maybe where it feels a little bit like editing, for example, which is always the Photoshop editing, which is always what people compare AI to, where does it need to be there in the long term? I mean, I haven't quite made up my mind. I think right now feel that there should always be a disclaimer, especially as AI gets more and more clever and it gets harder to discern. I do think people need to understand when something is quote unquote real, when it's not.
Yeah. Do you think that in a few years' time there's going to be, this ad was made by real humans, and that'll be able to...
Yeah, I don't know. And it's a really interesting debate. And again, I haven't got the answer for it because, so much stuff is fictional anyway. But I think when it comes to certain industries and categories, it's really important to understand when something is fictionalized. So I think it will end up being contextual when it needs to be.
Yeah, brought to life.
Labeled.
I don't know. Yeah, they're labelled. Yeah. So I think there's an interesting one. The jury's out for me on some of this. I mean, I won't even go there on what my views are on AI and content because that's slightly different. And I hate AI slop on LinkedIn. And my worry slightly is that how do you differentiate yourselves if all agencies and everyone involved in creative is able to have the same tools? Do you end up with sameness, AI sameness, a sea of sameness that borders on AI slop? And how do you differentiate yourself if everybody has access to that?
Often at Jellyfish, and I'm sure this is a phrase that's used more widely, we talk about AI raising the floor and humans raising the ceiling. And I think that's a great analogy for this space, which is AI creates better tech for everybody. But the amazing thing about human brains is that no one views things in the same way. The way that we see patterns and pull things together is so unique. And obviously, I'd say this as a strategist, but I do think that this is where strategy becomes even more important because we're facing the same challenges now as brands as we were 10 years ago. We just have better technology. So if you still don't know what your USP is as a brand, if you still don't understand your white space for an audience and how you serve them, if you still don't know how to differentiate yourself in terms of visuals and tone of voice, none of that gets better when you have better AI tools. If your fundamentals, and they're all strategic, aren't sound, you can't do any of that. So I think that's the first piece. And the second piece is that this is becoming very fashionable to say, but taste, human-led taste and expertise is more important than ever. If AI lets everyone have a baseline knowledge of anything, actually what's become very fashionable, and Eugene Healy, who's a wonderful cultural strategist, talked about this a little while ago. He said that the thing that became cool was actually having very deep knowledge of something that could only be learned over years of human-led study, instead of this idea that anyone can access anything. So I think there is going to be this future where having really niche expertise as a person or a real true understanding of a culture or a community because you're on the ground, paired with this real understanding of who you are as a brand and your differentiation, that is what then powers amazing tools.
Has it helped though? Because Jellyfish has been, I would say, pretty much first out the gate on a lot of things to do with AI, like from agentic to bias breaking. Has that helped? First mover advantage?
I think so. I mean, I think it adds a certain pressure and people look to you. But I think what it has done is that some of my colleagues, really, really incredible, smart people like Becky Sykes, have been able to set industry standards for things like the bias breaker, for things like sustainability. And so I think it's been really amazing to watch these incredible colleagues of mine shape the future of the industry, not just use the fact that we have a first mover advantage to drive better tech. And so that's been very cool and a nice thing to see. So
I mentioned first out the gate. That's an equestrian term, so you know what I'm going to ask you about. 135,000 followers. You're an amazing creator in your own right. So obviously we've got to ask, tell us about the platform and tell us about Riding with Rhi. Fascinated.
Yes. So Riding with Rhi started. So I always rode as a child. And then I took a little break when I moved to London, and I was working for Netflix at the time. And I started sharing a horse again. So riding a horse a couple of times a week. And in order to fit that in, I would ride at like 5:30, 6 a.m. And I sort of sharing things on my Instagram stories, and my friends were my minds were blown by this idea that you could have this dual life, like in London one day and then riding at 5 a.m. or whatever. And so I thought, with my social hat on, I was like, oh, maybe there's a space for this to talk about. And at the time, there actually weren't many equestrian creators who didn't have their own horses. So there was a gap there. So I started the channel and kind of did it a little bit for fun. And as it's evolved, I mean, I've had the most incredible opportunities. I've traveled to America to learn about, driving techniques. I've presented TV series for Horse and Country. We have a podcast now, This Equestrian Life. And for me, the more senior that I've got, the further away from the platforms you end up being, because you're a little bit further from the actual day-to-day of the work. And what the channel allows me to do is to stay really close to the craft. And so if I have a hypothesis about something or the algorithm, I'll test it with my audience, and then I'm able to bring it to a brand and be like, okay, case study of one, this is what I found. And I love that. I love being able to have both sides. And of course it's my passion. So it doesn't feel like work at all.
If you haven't lived your own experience, how can you possibly then help strategize on this? That's one thing. And actually, your colleague Tara said something, and I'm going to I wrote this down. Tara spoke to the press saying the creator is no longer a distribution channel. They're a fundamental part of building brand's identity. And I really wanted to get your thoughts on that, because you're sitting on both sides.
Absolutely. I think if you are still of the position that creators are there to give you reach and engagement, you are missing the bigger picture, and you are missing the opportunity to get something bigger. Creators have to be tuned in incredibly well to the platforms and to their audience, because that is how they get engagement. It's how they grow. It's how they get brand deals. That is literally their job. And because of that, they become the most incredible sources of strategy, audience insight. They often lead productions. I mean, look at Amelia de Moldenberg with her Passenger Princess series that she did with the F1. She concepted that, scripted it, edited it, produced it, starred in it. She is like a powerhouse, and almost every single creator is like that.
They've got to be a jack of all trades, really, haven't they? That's vital.
They do, but I mean, that feels like a disservice, because they have to do it at such a good level in order to be successful. And so when I see brands who bring in creators as creative directors or production leads, or for brainstorms, or to give them audience insight, like that for me is a really underutilized area of creatives.
So before we move on to just a final bit of your hot takes and your quick fire round, I just suddenly thought of a thing. When it comes to being paid, do you think creators are paid fairly, underpaid, overpaid, misunderstood?
I think often what happens is, because for some brands, creators and working with creators is still so new, they often don't know how to tie it to tangible results. And because of that, they get a campaign and they're like, well, did it do well? It got lots of views. Is that good? And then they can't go back to their company and say, well, I know that this is the ROI. They can't tie it back to brand metrics. And as a result, they can't unlock budget. Because they can't unlock budget, they can't pay the creators. So I think the fundamental fix here, and industries and brands that have done this always have better experiences, is understand, like, before you even start, what are you trying to get from this creator? Is it a new audience? Is it the authority to talk about something? Is it just extra views and reach? And then tie that back to your long-term brand goals again. And
can you measure it? Don't go into it unless you can measure it and against the values needed. Love that. We're going to come on to your hot takes. You can give 3 hot takes, and I had thought of AI and creativity, but I want you to do creator AI and creativity, because you're sat on all 3. So the hottest takes on the future of creator AI and creativity. Go.
I don't necessarily believe in the future of AI creators for every industry. I think they'd be great for like UGC ads, but I think the future of the best creators is going to be in niche areas where they fundamentally understand the audience.
Perfect.
Human creativity is more important than ever. AI tools are incredible, but I think trust your gut, trust your craft, and often the answer to a campaign is much simpler than you think. The human truth is much simpler than you think.
So a third one, and I'm just throwing this at you, the future for creators is, finish that sentence.
Full funnel and full workflow, not just distribution.
Perfect. I put you right on the spot then. I'm going to do it again. Ready for the final bit, your quick fire round. So you've got to say the first thing that comes into your mind. Okay, ready?
Yes.
One brand that's genuinely nailing AI and creativity right now.
Adobe. They combine incredible AI tech with creator-led stuff. And it's very cool.
Perfect. Next one, biggest myth about AI in marketing.
That it only does creativity or creative.
Yeah, it does so much more. I think people do always think that, don't they? Right, you're starting from scratch as a creator, completely new space. You can't pick where you're in right now. What niche would you choose and why?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Returning to education as an adult, I have this dream of doing like a part-time master's in literature. I think it would be something like that.
I love that. I did classics at university and had to read Homer's Iliad in ancient Greek. And it's one of the most odd things. And I used to play the cello. So I want to return to playing the cello.
Yeah.
But I'd like to have a creator channel. And can I relearn the cello? Maybe I'll do it when I retire. Watch this space. Jules's cello.
Yeah. Ruby Granger, if you haven't seen her, she did a master's and a degree at Oxford in literature, and her channel is just so like Moorish. It's not as an adult, but it's still very good, and that's very vibey.
That's where you're going to see Rhea in the future. Right. One campaign or piece of work you're especially proud of, and it can be at Jellyfish or prior to that.
At Netflix, the Black Mirror campaigns, because the audience was so fun, and like doing Bandersnatch in season 5 was amazing. At Jellyfish, our YouTube creators retainer, like the incredible work that the team do there with creators is just phenomenal.
Rhiannon, honestly, thank you so much for joining me today. That's been amazing.
It's been so fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So in a world that's moving faster than ever, the brands that win will absolutely be those that don't just automate, but actually understand culture, creativity, and the people they're trying to reach. And if you've got a hot take on creative or AI, we'd love to hear it. I know Rhiannon would too. So before we go, a very quick thank you again to our season 3 partner, Revving. Revving believes digital businesses should have greater control over how and when capital is deployed. You can get in touch with them at revving.io, and they're giving much more flexible access to revenue and ensuring that capital keeps pace with performance. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, share the episode, and of course, follow us so you don't miss a single legend. Until next time, I'm Julia Linehan. Keep it juicy.